Oh, well, the short answer is yes. There actually was. There was a lot more recognition of poetry. For instance, Amanda Gorman read at Biden's inauguration, and that drew attention. And during, I think for several years in the last, 7 or 8 years, I've noticed that, from statistics that there's more readership of poetry. I think people did, in fact, turn more to sort of the healing arts, as you could call them, during the pandemic and following. And I think it's sort of kind of, we've determined a little bit of a spiritual nature to ourselves in the recent years. And poetry, I do believe, as I said, is deeply spiritual, and it's of the essence of spirit. And so yes, people have been reading more poetry since COVID has occurred. Yes, I think so.
Thank you, sir, for such a nice, such a great talk. And the question that I would like to ask is, how do you define a reader, or to be more precise, when you talk about a good reader, what and who is a good reader to you?
A good reader. Well, I would say you'd have to be very careful about nuance in what you're reading. And I think that basically I would define that as the various levels of meaning that can be in a text. Sort of the hermeneutics of a text. You want to be pretty, you want to think about what you're reading enough that you're able to interpret it in different ways, and also have a fairly good background in what you're reading, which takes time, of course. But gradually, I think you develop an understanding of the literature you're reading, and you develop a little bit of an understanding of how this kind of literature would function, and so you are more able to understand some of the nuances. So I think a good reader is a nuanced reader.
Okay, but having said that, sir, don't you think that a reader basically comes from a context? So from your answer, I would come to the next question. That when you write, do you think about a reader or a reader group of readers when you write about, say for example, when you're writing a poetry, do you think about who you are writing for or who your audience is? Do you have that in mind, or is it simply a process of expressing yourself?
When I write when it's specifically poetry, I'm writing to express something inside me, and it's just a very solitary activity for me. I don't always think, and most of the time I don't think of who would be reading it. When I write essays or any other number of kind of critical writings, I in fact do think about who is reading and try to explain to them what exactly I'm trying to say throughout the process of the writing. But for poetry, it's simply, for me, it's me and the page. I just sit down and I'm writing what I think, and I'm exploring ideas, and a lot of times I don't even know what's going to come of it. I surprise myself quite a bit with my writing.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any more questions? Yeah. Participants who have joined us online on the virtual mode, they can also unmute themselves and ask the questions if they have it.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
So I'm an undergraduate student in English literature, and I tried writing poetry, and I published some of my poems on Instagram. And I don't know, you call it this age, the age of scandal,
Mm-hmm.
and it is dominated by online and virtual interactions. So what I want to ask is, does poetry offer a specific advantage over prose in these times? Because we live in a time of diminishing attention spans, where most people just want to consume 15-second TikTok reels or Instagram like shorts.
Mm-hmm.
So does poetry offer any advantage over these other forms of communication?
That's a really good question. I don't know if it offers an advantage. Our means of expression have become more, succinct, I guess. And, as far as, online, I think it does. It does. It's impactful. When you look at it in terms of like a meme or something online, then you find that it's easier to read. It's quicker to read, and it's if it's well stated, it's a much easier way of communication. But in general, I think prose can, and at least in terms of ideas online, I think prose can be better for that because it's more long-winded, and I think people can, or that are more in-depth readers online would be more interested in that. But I do think poetry has a impact in terms of like the brevity and the nature of the communication, because it can be a lot more surprising in its features, I think. And online, that's definitely an advantage.
Thank you.
Any more questions?
What is the right way? I saw some electronic hands. Yes, the participants who have joined us virtually, they can also unmute their mic and they can ask the questions. This session is open for the question and answer.
Read the down.
Sir, there is a question, Mr. Speaker.
Mm-hmm.
Could say the theme selection on poetry. How can someone choose the theme for the book?
How would you choose a theme for poetry? Well, my personal experience is it generally comes straight from feeling and what I'm experiencing, as Wordsworth was quoted as saying, "Recollected in tranquility." I don't really choose themes specifically. I don't work very well with prompts, but I think that if a theme-wise, I think it's true that you can imagine what you're going to write to an extent and kind of work your way around it, like shaping a sculpture out of clay, or something of that nature. Like you can kind of have an idea of what you're going to think about or what you're going to write about. A lot of times, for me, it comes from what I'm feeling and perceiving in life as I'm going through, or what I've been reading. Sometimes that translates into my poetry. I don't know how I would, if you would consciously select a theme as you're writing, or if it would just sort of kind of appear to you as you're writing. And a lot of times for me too, it happens that when I'm writing, certain things start showing up in my writing. I do remember when I wrote Salt and Sorrow, which was published I think in 2016. The publisher requested I write something on in his words was "Bring the God of the Bible out." I thought that was a funny theme, so I was able to write around that, and that's possible. But for me, generally, I don't really select a theme as I'm writing. It just kind of emerges.
All right, thank you so much.
Thank you, sir.
But the beginning, I want to ask you something about translation of poetry. That's
time understanding. Can you repeat that? It was a little bit of an echo.
Very complicated. She was asking about issues in translation.
Okay.
Poetry translation is rather challenging. What do we leave out? What do we retain when we are translating a poem? Some of the things may be insurmountable in terms of cultural transmission. So what do we leave out? What do we keep? That's the question.
I only know English, so I've never translated. But I've talked with translators, and I think a lot of it depends on cultural context. You don't want to translate literal, from what I understand. You want to translate it into the cultural context you're translating into, so it can be understood by that readership. And that's sort of tricky, you want to make sure that the poetry still flows and still works well with its, with the audience it's actually reading it. So that's what I think in terms of translation.
Can I ask a related one? You are writing poetry, and what do you think about the translations of your poetry? I'm sure your works must have been translated into various other languages. What do you think? How do you judge the translations of your own poetry into other languages?
I've been translated into several languages. Albanian, I think Bengali. I had some in Bengali. Spanish, Portuguese. I find it, since I don't read those languages very well. I just like the idea that somebody else is reading my poems in their own language, and that they can actually understand it maybe a little differently than I had intended. And the nuance there would be something interesting to me to understand how they perceived the poem in terms of the way it was translated.
Mr. Pickering, there is another very new development which worries everybody. That is the chat GPT and AI. Very soon, like for the lab, I have a small group, my nephews and my nieces. We have given the group, WhatsApp group, a name. I asked chat, GPT to come up with the poem in honor of the group, and within 2 seconds I got, something like a poem celebrating this group and so on. So, what is the future of poetry in the face of the challenge from artificial intelligence? In fact, I understand that one of those paintings done by AI nearly won an award, in competition with human painters.
Mm-hmm.
So what about poets? Are they worried?
Well, I think for the poet themselves, for poets themselves, I think that the experience of writing poetry can't be replicated by AI, obviously. We can have the reading of poetry through AI, but we can't have the experience of actually crafting poetry. And I think we can also, as humans, we can be more inventive than the bots. We can play with language, and we can be more voluntary, in our use of language, and basically just enjoy the act of writing rather than, I don't know about readership, how that would affect the readership, but it is very impressive that they can create these really intricate forms and so forth through the artificial intelligence. And that it replicates the human mind. I mean, it's really interesting, but I think that the experience of writing from a human perspective can't be replicated.
There's one more question, Mr. Pickering. Could you please share your opinion on spontaneous poetry?
I'm not familiar with the term. What is that exactly?
There is a question that could you please share your opinion on spontaneous poetry? How can someone write and spontaneous poetry?
Slam poetry.
Oh, slam poetry, yes. It's mostly oriented towards performance. I've attended a few slams. in performance poetry. I like the fact that you're using gesture and you're using your voice to convey a sense of meaning in the within the work. I find that a lot of times the poetry itself is very concrete. It's not reader quality poetry. It's more like for the performance. And I do believe it's an interesting style, and it can bring people to poetry and hearing it, and they may be more interested in other forms. But I also think that as a quality of literature, a lot of times it doesn't resonate with me personally. But I do enjoy the use of the quality of the using the body and using the your voice and your tones and everything as an instrument in conveying your meaning of the poem.
Thank you so much. So we will end now this question answer session. For the vote of thanks, I would like to invite Jaidev.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Jaidev. I'm a scholar from the Department of English Literature. As we come to the end of this event, I would like to express my sincere gratitude to all of you for being here with us today. First and foremost, I would like to extend a warm note of thanks to our resource person, Mr. Dustin Pickett, who graced us with his valuable presence. Thank you, sir, for taking the time and effort to join us and for sharing your expertise with us. We look forward to collaborating with you again. I would like to thank our Chief Patron and Honorable Vice Chancellor, Professor E. Suresh Kumar, who supported us in this endeavor. I would also like to thank the Registrar, Professor K. Narasimha Rao, for making this event possible. Next, I would like to thank the Dean, School of Literary Studies, Professor Karibandi Lakshmi, and Dean, Academics and Head, Department of English Literature, Professor Samson Thomas, for their guidance and support in making this event a success. A big thank you goes out to all the faculty, especially Dr. Anmala Sridevi ma'am and Dr. Niligadi Rajkumar sir, for executing this event flawlessly. I would also like to thank all the attendees for your participation and engagement. Throughout this event, your presence and active involvement have made this event a grand success. Once again, thank you all who have made this event a memorable one. Let us carry forward the knowledge and experience gained from the talk and apply a positive impact in our respective fields. Thank you, everyone, and have a pleasant evening. Thank you.
Thank you to the secretarial and the staff, members and the technical teams.
Thank you for the technical team as well as the office staff for providing us with the necessary support. Thank you. Once again. Mr. Pickering, can you be online for a few more moments so that we may take a photograph with you?
Yes. Yes.
Over to you, Salman.